And I guess I can see from your screen where it actually goes through. Nope, there it goes.
We're gonna watch now. There you are.
Wow.
We're gonna watch now.
Okay, now I have to like not look at that because the lag will freak me out. Okay, let's see. So
You also probably need to stop talking on
2000.
Discord.
There's like a 6 second lag. But yeah, you're right. I need to mute myself. All right, now I'm gonna go back to Twitch, but there is a 6 second lag between these two things, so just be mindful of whatever that's like. Okay. Hello, everybody. Now speaking. Okay, I think I'm gonna squish Discord in my view just because it's distracting to see myself twice on one screen, one of which is significantly lagged. So Trent, I'll be able to see like DMs and stuff like that. So, do that as you wish. And okay, let's go ahead and get started. I say and then I don't get started. Okay, yeah. Cool. Thanks, Brainathic. I hope so. Okay, yeah. So let's go ahead and get started. So I have some. Basically, we've been working over here on this end, and we've got something together that is beginning to resemble an actual like proper like 1.0 release, which is a major step and a major milestone in this project. It's been a couple of years coming. Thank you. But it's also like, it's just the first step of a long journey. Like 1.0 for me means that 1.0 is like a proper software. Like you can use it for tasks, and it will do its job. It is not the biggest number that exists. So it's more of so what's happening in this phase is like there's going to be a bit of a change in vibe, whereas everything up until this point has kind of been like, sort of more like we're expecting and understanding that like that we're sort of like we don't have a complete project yet, and 1.0 is getting to the place. Oh, you're getting audio. Oh, I know where you're getting audio from. You're probably getting that. Did the echo go away? I hope so. Yeah, cool. It's because I was streaming both my mic and the desktop audio, and I must have something that's playing my voice there. Still there? We're still getting. Oh, I also need to mute the Discord stream. That probably helped. Yeah? Cool. Okay, and I think I can probably turn my desktop audio back on. Cool. So yeah, so we are starting to roll out like a software that I think can be used by people to do motion capture. This is very far from being like it'll never be done. Software is never done. Software it is always as good as it has ever been and worse than it will ever be. And that's kind of where we're getting to now. The big difference I think in what I'm in my head about the 1.0 is that the code base has now gotten to roughly the place where it would need to be to accept outside help. I started this project with members of my lab. When we first started writing FreeMoCap code, I had never written Python code before in my life. I was working with Aaron, who's in the stream, and we put together what we've been calling the pre-alpha, which I think it's still the high watermark in terms of performance in a lot of ways, in terms of just being like a click the button, go through, and you'll get a recording. The problem is that it's that what happens when you have code that's not written to like modern and professional standards is it becomes very, very difficult to maintain or extend or debug because the pieces are sort of, it was spaghetti code. Um, and I have been now in a kind of like mentoring with Endurance Adehan, who's the CTO of FreeMoCap Foundation, who has many years experience doing professional software development. And he sort of gotten me to the point where I can write code that is certainly not perfect, but it is encapsulated enough that it is beginning to resemble ravioli rather than spaghetti. And the nice thing about that is it means that it's what the advantage of having code like that is that it is possible for people to work on parts of it without having to engage with the rest of the code base. And we've been kind of running through some kind of like proof of concept sort of workflows in the lab with people like Trent and Philip and Aaron of starting to work on the process of like, okay, you work on this small part and then do a pull request, and then we'll review the pull request and kind of like iterate on stuff until it's ready to be merged. And it's been going pretty well, and I'm now sort of comfortable with the idea of opening things up to the broader community and feeling like we can have like productive development happening asynchronously in a decentralized way, which is of course like the dream of motion of open source software, is that everybody can come together and sort of work together on it. But there's all sorts of challenges there too. Sort of like the utopian ideal is that many hands make light work, but the reality is that with more hands requires more. Each additional hand requires additional onboarding and additional sort of like work and effort. Sort of like if you have 100 people come in and say, "Hey, I did this. I added some functionality. I fixed some bug," but they're all using different code styles and sort of different approaches. Then it becomes very difficult to actually integrate that. So we're going to be working in that direction of actually bringing more people in. So, so let's see, what's the right order of operations here? And I think what I'll do is I'll try to talk through this thing, and then I'll sort of like turn to chat and answer questions and talk about things like that. So that we can, because I want to have like some video artifact that I can put online for people to refer to if they didn't make it to the stream, just so they can sort of catch the general vibe. I think towards the end of this, I will show the software, show how it exists, and talk a little bit about like its current status and sort of how to use it. But that's not really the purpose of this stream. There probably will be a stream coming up in the next couple weeks or so that will be sort of like here's the GUI, here's how you use it, blah, 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 blah. But this particular stream is more of a like conversation with the community about the next phase that's coming up, and so that we can sort of like collectively try to do the community organization that will be necessary to handle what I expect will be an increase in number of the people who are using this, because even though we currently have so if you were interested in using new software, just go to the GitHub page. There's instructions on the top of the README on how to install it. But don't expect it to be seamless, and don't expect it to not have like crashy, laggy sort of like parts and like user interface stuff that's sort of like there's like potential there's like if you click the wrong buttons in the wrong order, like you can get into a broken state and have a hard time getting out of it. And that is that's kind of where we are. And so before, I think the next major milestone is dropping the release candidate from FreeMoCap 1.0 RC. RC means release candidate, and having like the actual full release. And in order to get it to that place, I want it to be in a place where if a random person comes in who has never heard of this project before and sort of like, hasn't been a part of like the community of development, that they just have a software that works, and that if they have something that breaks on them, it's like a surprise to us. Because right now it's like, I tell people it's like you can use it, but like it's just manage your expectations. Um, and I think that, and the reason why I'm trying to do this like slowly is because, looking, I read this book, uh, which is that backwards? No, they reverse it. So it's called Working in Public: The Making and Maintenance of Open Source Software by Nadia Egbal. Um, and it's like a sociology book about like open source projects and sort of how they evolve and sort of like how successful ones succeed and how the potential pitfalls and stuff like that. And I think that one of the biggest potential pitfalls of this software is growing too quickly and not managing the complexity, because the reality is it's a complex piece of technical software and there's a lot of places that it can break. And so to set it up appropriately to be like, actually maintain like the goal of the project, which is this, you know, this guy, user, creating a system that serves the needs of a professional research scientist, that's me, and others, while remaining intuitive to a 13-year-old with no technical training and no outside assistance. That's a really high bar for usability and user interface design. And realistically, it is an aspirational goal more than an actual goal. Like we don't want to, um, like, it's a goal that we aspire to over time. It's not a goal that we're at now. And it's the kind of thing, it might even be like strictly speaking impossible in the most extreme form of it, because professional research software is complex, and things that are intuitive to 13-year-olds with no technical training and no outside assistance are tend not to be. And so it's a challenge. um, and so what I really want with this phase of like the 1.0 RC is for us to practice workflows that will allow people from the community, either with a lot of experience or with less experience, to sort of like start to actually contribute in a more integrated way. I think that the way that things have evolved up until now has been kind of there's like a model for what it is. It's sort of like a stadium model where there's a lot of people who are interested in the project and who are like hanging out in the Discord and sort of like are waiting for updates, but the actual people who are doing the development have been up until the past couple months, has been pretty much just me, and then more recently it's been like me and like a couple of people within my lab, and I think it was important for it to live in that state for a while, so that I could personally understand like what the software was trying to be, and I could get like the technical capacities that are necessary to sort of build an open source software that can grow. But that's not the goal for this project. The goal for this project is not for it to be like a thing that I make and other people use. It's to spin up a community and a framework and sort of like a software infrastructure around free and open source motion capture tools that I will continue to be a big part of. But like ideally, it's the kind of thing that like if I got hit by a truck tomorrow, it would not be the end of FreeMoCap, and that is the goal that we're trying to achieve. So da 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 da. Also, just to be clear, this list was made by GPT-4, so it's got that kind of like, what I'm now recognizing is that like that good like AI flavor of being like statistically very similar to the correct answers, but not necessarily 100% coextensive with what I was actually going for. So do let's take a pause there, and let's see if there's been any commentary. Trent, can I hear you? Are you still there? Oh, I guess there's chat here. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Yeah. Mostly people talking about echoes. Oh, some familiar faces or some familiar usernames, I suppose. How do I do this again? Da, 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 da. And okay, cool. Um, cool. So yeah, so just to reiterate, FreeMoCap is we have the new release is currently lives in the releases tab of our GitHub. It's the FreeMoCap 1.0 pre-release. Let me change that to 1.0 instead of 1.0.0 because I'm still updating those little guys. Oh, it's still that one. That's fine. Who cares? Da 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 da. And if you go to the repo and follow these instructions, and then just pip install FreeMoCap, you have to specify the version. 1.0. I think if you do tilde equals 1.0, it will update the minor version, but I'm actually not sure. I think the latest is like 1.0.7, but I can't remember. And then if you just run FreeMoCap, it will pop up a GUI that looks similar to this. Actually has been changed slightly since then, but it's the same basic idea. And this has been up and out for month and change. We just posted it with basically no fanfare whatsoever. It was just kind of like sneaking it in the night. And it does have these kind of user pings that we send. So there's a little checkbox down here that if you don't uncheck it, it like sends us a notification when you use the code, when you use the software, which is just sort of helpful for us to know what's happening with it, both for our own purposes and also for like funding and stuff like that. Like if we want to get funding for this, we want to be able to show that it's being used. And we even with no fanfare whatsoever, it has been used over 1,000 times across the world. It has we've gotten over 200 unique IP addresses from over 50 different countries, which is pretty dang exciting, but also pretty intimidating. And that is why I've sort of like the vibe of this presentation here is not like, hey, everybody go use this, go download it, tell your friends, like post to Twitter, like post to Mastodon or whoever. Like it's more like, holy shit, guys, there appears to be a sea change happening in this project. And I want to make sure that we sort of shore up our like community structure to be able to handle a potential influx of new people, because again, in this book, one of the main themes is that there's this kind of like sort of fundamental tension that exists in any open source software and any open source community, where on the one hand you want more people, you want more users, you want more hands on deck, but there are real emotional bottlenecks in how much an individual person can contribute to anything. And so we'll need to have some sort of just sort of community structure that sort of can handle if a bunch of new people come in asking very similar questions. And the reality is that most questions that we get in the server now could be answered by someone who has like read the documentation clearly, partially. And I don't fault people for that at all. Like I do the same thing. But we'd mostly, just like having a group of mods of people who are just willing to like look at questions as they're coming in, and then just like link them to that section of the documentation, and or that documentation or the roadmap. A lot of people come in like saying, hey, is it going to have real time? Hey, I want to put this in a VR game. Like, oh, hey, I want to like where's the Unreal support? Like, oh, hey, like have you like fixed the Blender thing yet? And the answer to most of those questions is either in the docs or on the roadmap. And so just pointing people towards those things so that they're not people don't just show up and ask questions and don't get an answer, it would be really helpful. And then that will also help us understand what the holes are in our documentation. So if someone's like, oh, like people keep coming in with like this similar problem, and it's like, and there's nowhere obvious to point them to. It's like, okay, cool. So let's shore up that gap in our documentation, and then and then now that sort of makes everybody's task easier to shore up that problem. Or even potentially, it's like, wow, everyone keeps having this problem. We should probably move that bug fix up the priority list, so that we can actually sort of like, it's like you can patch the leak at the place that it's leaking, or you could go into the plumbing and fix like the juncture that actually caused the problem to begin with. And the question of which one to do for a given problem is dependent on like the severity of the problem and like the available workload, the work effort, from the people who can actually do that kind of work. So da, da, da. So yeah, so if you want to use the software, you can, and I believe these instructions are up to date. They're ugly, but the information is good. Yeah. So this is our current. These are our current documentation. This is our current documentation. It lives on. Oh no, this is actually my hosting it. FreeMoCap. Is it .read the docs? Yeah. This is our current documentation. The other one was like posting from the code on my computer, and it's not a bad start. It's got most of the information you would need there, but it's just currently out of date because like there's information on how to use the pre-alpha and the alpha and like loading stuff with like the older versions of the GUI, and so these ones can basically go away and live either in like an earlier version of the GUI or just like be put somewhere off to the side so that they're not where they need to, so they're not in the way of like the standard happy path, and then there's all sorts of like educational stuff around the software because it is such a technical tool. There's all sorts of stuff relating to just like camera and computer hardware, like the machine learning algorithms that are behind the tracking, the old school computer vision stuff behind the calibration process, OpenCV stuff, the stages of the processing pipeline that need to happen with like things like reprojection error. I'm going to be teaching a class on a very related topic over the summer, and my plan is to scrape some of the educational stuff I make for that class and make it a part of the documentation and the knowledge base for this software, so that there can be, in addition to like the development, like the software development side of things and the sort of like basic usage side of things, there also will be information about how to actually use FreeMoCap to do like scientific research or things of that nature. And yeah, and then also the roadmap. So this one is quite old at this point, but somehow still appropriate for the tasks that we need to happen. So I need to update this, but like, like, and this so updating the roadmap was something that I could have planned for this stream, but it didn't happen in that way because I was too busy working on like this stuff, which I'll talk about in a second. But a lot of these things are still outstanding. So like our Blender output is still needs work. I have like a basic proof of concept of CG Tinker's add-on, but it doesn't quite work. There's still performance issues at the camera level that hopefully will be fixed soon because there's a branch of, so actually since I wrote that, we have split FreeMoCap up. So there's FreeMoCap proper, which is the GUI that everyone knows and love. And there's also Skelly Cam, which is a separated package that handles all of the camera stuff. And so this is also, it lives on pip. You can pip install Skelly Cam independently of FreeMoCap. And this now just lives as a dependency of FreeMoCap proper. And so that way, we're at a higher level, we call that we're moving away from the mono repo approach, which is this everything in one giant repository, into connected micro repos. So, basically, we want to split the core functionality of FreeMoCap into multiple repositories, because that will make the development easier. Because in the current code, I know that if anything goes wrong with the cameras, it's Skelly Cam's fault. So I don't have to like worry about what's going on in FreeMoCap. I can work on the camera stuff independently in this package, and then update it, push a new version to pip, reinstall it into FreeMoCap, and then that will be using the new code. It makes the development a little bit more complicated because you do have to go to multiple repos, but it splits off the work and encapsulates things more. So those are the trade-offs, and that's kind of, yeah, I think it's a good one. Oh, but hey, thanks, Roadkill Grill. Yeah, I think this one is probably the branch that we still have the issue of like you get lag if you have more than a couple of cameras running at the same time. The lag is happening on the viewing end, so actually all of the frames are still being recorded, but if your computer can't handle displaying them fast enough, you'll pick up lag. So you'll wind up watching yourself from several seconds ago in the GUI, which you can work with, but it's really hard to work with. So that's a low level sort of like code based thing that needs to be fixed, and this branch is the one that should hopefully fix that. Yeah, and then improving the workflow, improving the post processing pipeline, and those are parts of it. Setting up the automated sort of GitHub based stuff, so we're going to talk about that in a second. And then command line based interfaces to sort of separate the like model view controller style, so separating the GUI from the actual working code and sort of having some kind of command line based controller that you can for batch processing and things like that. And then of course the question that every single person wants to know, this is the question that everybody asks, and it's because it's the right question, which is, does it have real time? Can I stream the data in real time? And the answer remains no for now, but a lot of the improvements in the code base, especially on the Skelly Cam side of things, are built in the direction of having something that can work in real time. So you can have something, you might have to have a pretty beefy computer or crank down like the speed accuracy knob. You have to crank it more towards speed. But there would be something that could stream into like a VR game or some kind of like interactive component. That's the goal, that's the dream, and this workflow is probably still pretty close to accurate in that space, but we need to update this, and this could then be something like, so then in the server someone comes in and they say, oh hey, does it have real time? Then there's a canned answer to that, which is like, oh yeah, we're working on it, here's the link to the roadmap, maybe here's a link to like the pull request that's working on it, something like that. And like that kind of like just routing of information as it comes in is something that I want to start engaging the community with, because at first it was me in my lab doing stuff, and I have not been very present in the server just because I've been focused on other stuff, and it's been on the members of my lab to help out with that. But again, like the numbers are growing, and as the numbers grow, the bottlenecks of people managing it get more and more constrained. So I think that there's already a pretty clear, like there's already groups of people and like individuals who have sort of been engaged enough that like I just know their name and I trust them enough that they could just jump in and start helping. And I also want to start building inroads for people who haven't been around and haven't been talking, to start to contribute in certain ways, and just like, even if it's just like copy pasting links to the documentation to standard answers, like that's unbelievably helpful. Um, and then also like on a similar note, I think I'll harp on this for like a little bit more, and then I'll talk a little bit more about like the new contributing guidelines that I'm developing. Um, uh, and then we'll take things from there. But splitting things up and starting to engage the community more also allows for us to start making progress in aspects of the development that like we here on the human lab side of things just simply don't have the skill sets or the capacities to really push forward in the way that I think they deserve. The biggest one for me on that is like a solid Blender output of the data that sort of automatically is sort of like thrown into a Blender scene in a form and structure that an animator type person can work with. That has been a challenge for this entire process. We managed to get some proof of concept output into Blender quite some time ago, um, but it was never really set up properly for like an animator's workflow. Like the bones had twisting artifacts, and like the way that the empties were, the way things were, the way it was driving the armatures with the empties was not something for something else. Like it's just and people were able to work with it. So Vandalo is probably the one who's done the best. So if you search for Vandalo V4N DLO in the server, you'll see some of his posts. He and some others were able to get some like we're able to work with our output to make nice looking animations. But it was some effort for them, and I really want to get that up to the place where it needs to be for animators and game designers to actually use the tool, because the reality is that what when animators what I have learned in the course of this project is that when animators think about motion capture data, they think about things like an FBX or a BVH or something that is sort of like already resembles this type of data, right? An armature that's being driven and rigged and sort of has all the right skeleton joints and parts, and so that way you can attach your mesh to this thing and drive your whatever. And if you look at the the various like tutorials and stuff about how to animate from motion capture data, it all starts with something that looks like this. It's like, okay, step one, load the raw data, which by raw data, this typically means a BVH or an FBX file, because that is the raw data that comes out of most professional motion capture systems, like like your Vicons or your Qualisys or whatever. The problem is that the FBX, the rigged armature, is not the actual raw geometric data that comes out of a motion capture system. The actual, well, arguably the raw data is just like the image is from the camera, but that's not particularly useful. But the actual raw data is 3D joint trajectories, 3D or marker trajectories. So this is markers from a marker-based system, and the actual raw data that comes out of that is the trajectory of this dot in 3 dimensions. In our markerless system, the equivalent is the trajectory of the joint centers that come out. And that's a very helpful thing in a lot of ways, but there's that middle step between the raw joint and marker joint trajectories to the sort of like armature that can have a mesh attached to it. This is equivalent to like like if you're in Blender and you load Rigify and you click, you import like a human meta rig. This is like that's one of this type of data, and it's just been challenging to get a reliable automated system that will drive a armature object from the raw data in a way that does not break the desired workflows of people who are animators. So that's a long and roundabout way of saying that one of the projects, sort of like the community-driven projects that I want to sort of get kicked off, is working with animators to actually create that workflow and create that output in a way that will allow them to work and actually use the data that they get from FreeMoCap in a useful way, in a sort of functional way. And I think that's a particularly good opportunity for a community project because Blender is already a big free open source project, so there are sort of like animator developer types floating around both in this community and in sort of adjacent communities. And I think that with some conversations with them, like between like us on the dev side and them on the sort of like experienced animator side, we could probably get something that works pretty well. There's already like halfway done integration of CG Tinker's Blendar mocap, but it got to the space where I didn't have the time or like workload availability to really work on it, nor do I have the expertise or the background to like be able to like properly evaluate if I'm doing it properly. And then no one else in my lab does either because we're like a scientific research lab. So I think starting to split things off or starting to open up the development to allow for that kind of contribution would really help us to sort of start to serve all the various sub communities that have sort of come to this project. Similarly, everyone that comes in and asking about like, oh, hey, is there a Unity integration? Is there an Unreal integration? Is there a Godot integration? The answer is I would love I have been answering those questions with things like no, but we're hoping to do that in the future. I would love to be able to answer those questions with here's the link to the pull request or the project board or whatever of the people who are working on making that integration. And here is the guidelines that we have in place for how you can contribute or at least understand what work is being done. And that I think is that's an exciting possibility for the future, and it's one that I think has been made viable by the recent improvements in the underlying architecture of the code base. So that's the dream. Okay. Okay, it's about 2:50. I know I can handle up until about 4. I think. I will be brain dead at 4, so we have to be done by 4. So I think for the remainder of the stream, I want to do a really quick overview of some of the contributing guidelines that I've been working on. I haven't integrated them into the documentation yet, just because I was literally working on them like 20 minutes ago. But I can talk a little bit about like what that contribution, what it would look like going forward for the community to start contributing into the development and the community management side of things. And then after that, I will just as a treat, I will run the GUI and do a single camera recording, which is a new feature that we added recently. And by we, I mean mostly Trent, because he was like, hey, we should maybe we should make this thing so that it works without having to do a bunch of calibration and stuff like that. And we managed to get something pretty fun out. And then we can take it from there. Okay. So first of all, what is okay? So these are some parts I started putting together. This is currently being hosted on Obsidian Publish. So if you don't know, Obsidian is a really nice, just like raw markdown editor that I've been using for a while, but I haven't really. I started using it several years ago, and then I put it down for some years, and I recently picked it back up, and it's just kind of like, oh wow, y'all been working really hard on this. And it's got some really nice features. This is my favorite one. It will sort of like show you your notes in this kind of like connected node graph. which I always find really fun. And it will also like host your stuff on a published site. So, I think, yeah. So it's publish.md, publish.obsidian.md/John Mathis. I guess I'll post this in the chat. I'm not gonna post it in the chat because it's not. This is Scratchpad stuff. Um, and I'm not even sure. Is it up to date? It may or may not be. Yeah. Wait. Oh, it is not up to date. Do do do. Control P. Publish changes. Documentation works in progress. Did I? Did I? Uh, uh, I think I may have. uh, I'm missing something that I was working on. There was a whole. I may have done a stupid. And nope, that's not that. Nope, not that either. What am I looking for? Oh. Boy, I sure hope I didn't lose my. I know I didn't lose my work that I did this morning to try to get the contributing guidelines together. Um, but oh, okay, yeah. I knew I hadn't lost it forever, but I might have lost it for the time being. But I did not. It is here. Um, this is a just VS Code right now, and like like I said, I haven't integrated this into the it's not in the docs yet, but it's there. It's simple stuff like, making community guidelines and codes of conduct, and making like fleshing out our contribution guidelines, contributing to the FreeMoCap project. How do I make? I just want to. I don't know how to just switch you to. Oop. Okay, sure. Um, and it'll be a lot of stuff like this. So just like instructions, like we're using GitHub Flow, which is just like a particular sort of method for handling, pull requests and things like that. We use GitHub, blah blah blah. Like, so yeah, stuff like this needs to be cleaned up because it's like repetitive. And then like if you want to make a contribution, like here's the steps you go through. You fork it, add your code, blah blah blah. Oh, these links don't work, I guess. Um, but they could. So you have like Python style guides of use these principles, follow these guidelines, and then like do things, and then like stylistic stuff like add doc strings and add type hints and prefer keyword arguments over not keyword arguments, and just like a lot of this kind of relatively boilerplate. Like this is the kind of stuff that like GPT is very good at doing, because it's like, hey, come up with like, show me the kinds of guidelines that open source projects have, and they will give me different options, and I can sort of pick and choose and sort of tweak it for our own purposes. And that way there can be guides of people who, when they're writing code and making contributions, they can sort of like look at this and be like, oh right, we're supposed to use black formatting, or oh yeah, we're supposed to use like these naming conventions and things like that. And some of that I think can be automated, so you can set up automations that will go through and be like, oh hey, it looks like you're using arguments and not keyword arguments, like could you do that? Or like, oh, like you forgot to add doc strings, you forgot to add type hints and stuff like that. And then also like how to give how to do a good bug report, how to do a feature request, how you do a quality of life request, and then making templates and things like that on GitHub, so that when you open up an issue, it can ask you um, if you are da, 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 oh, 1 second. It can give you a template that you can fill out, and so that again will kind of like help us to regularize the input that's coming in. That will help us sort of organize and disseminate. And I think that one of the ways that this might evolve is the way that a lot of things evolve as I've worked on them, which is the dream is to have everything fully automated. But until you get to that point, you just do it manually. And so one of the things that people who don't have a lot of software experience can do is just look at incoming issues and ask or pull requests and just ask the simple kind of like mechanical questions of like, does it follow the style guide? Like, have you run the black formatter on it? And things like that. Another major thing that we need to develop is tests, automated testing. We currently have little to no automated testing. Most of our testing involves saying like, hey, could someone try to record something with this and see if it crashes, which is not ideal. So one of the main things that we need to do going forward is to build out an automated test suite so that when you do a pull request, it will automatically run. It'll be something like download sample data and run an end-to-end test, or like do unit tests, on the individual components, and all these different sort of like methods for doing software testing that are it's hard to do. It's a classic thing in software development. Like you write the code and then you're supposed to write the test, but people like don't. It's like a meme that people don't write tests for their code. But one of the things that I think we're now getting to, now that the code has started to stabilize into sort of the 1.0-ish form, is it has always been worth it to write tests, but now it's definitely worth it to write tests. And it's going to take some time to get that working. But it's going to be essential to happen if we're going to be able to bring this project into like the next level of the process, where, because again, it's like if every time someone submits a pull request, somebody has to like bust out the Charuko board and like take a recording and then see if it crashes. First of all, that won't actually catch all the bugs. And secondly, it's just that much more emotional labor and time, effort, labor being asked of the people who are doing the maintenance. And that will, if that's our workflow, the project will eventually stagnate and fail, because that bottleneck will kill the development. Yeah, and then even stuff like reporting bugs and stuff like that. Just like, oh hey, it crashed. Like, here's a bug. Here's my logs. And then people can usually help, because often the crashes are either crashes that we kind of like knew were a problem and haven't been able to fix yet, or they're happening because there's something special about your setup that, the hardware that you're using, the computer that you're using, the cameras that you're using, that like we did not experience on our end because we don't have that range of hardware. And yeah, eventually we can do coverage tests. So we want like the long-term dream is like 100% coverage on all of our code. So every piece of code has testing associated with it. I guess the actual dream is like I think it's called MCDC, MCCD. It's the highest level of testing, where you have like unit tests and like end-to-end tests that handle every possible input and output from your code base. That again is an aspirational goal. Um, Boop-bit-doo. Sigma 7 testing. I told myself I wasn't going to look at the comment, but Sigma 7, someone wrote Sigma. Oh, it's Ephraim. Hey, Ephraim. Uh, and yeah, stuff like that. And like, this is also why I really want to open it up to the community, is because, you know, my experience is extremely limited. Like, this is a very new space for me. And, you know, I run a lab, which consists largely of, you know, student and student-like objects who also don't have like a lot of real-world experience. So every time I've done a Twitch stream, I've been talking about blah blah blah, I'm working on this, working on that, and then someone will drop some piece of terminology that it's like, oh, Sigma 7 testing. It's like, oh shit, I didn't even know that that was a thing. And so, like, by, you know, it's the sort of the walled garden sort of style of development that's happened so far has been kind of a protective mechanism, because I knew that the code and my understanding of how open source communities work was not at the level of where inviting a lot of outside help would have been helpful to me, at least at that phase in life. Because I knew where a lot of the problems were, and I had too much other stuff going on, and like trying to be a professor or whatever, that were limiting my ability to like focus on stuff. And so a lot of the effort, which is why a lot of the effort has been over the past, you know, year or more, has been to get the code into a place that it is amenable to outside help. Even when, ironically, like, there are many ways in which like the current GUI is like less of a reliable way to get motion capture data than the original pre-alpha from however long ago. And that is because we have not been chasing performance. We've been chasing code cleanliness and reliability and encapsulation and those kind of like low-level architecture issues, that will allow us to build greater functionality in a way that is actually maintainable and sustainable. So that is that's the idea. I'm gonna Google Sigma 7 testing because I'm curious. And that's Mark of Argyle. Hello. Oh, that's MOA. MOA development. What's this? Oh, okay. There's a whole other guy here. Top performing. I don't even know what that is. I think it's MCDC testing. Yeah. Modified condition decision coverage. I think it's just similar. I think they're probably similar things. Anyways, we'll get there. Okay. What else was I going to talk about? Yeah, so contributing guidelines. Oh yeah, and then like mod recruitment at some point. Like people who are just willing to be, you know, mods. And a lot of that doesn't need to be like sort of official. Like, I think people have already been acting as like, I guess the term, it's more like community ambassadors than actual mods. Like mods, it feels like there's like a cop aspect to it of like you know, like squashing bad behavior, which is important. You know, we need that. But I think like community ambassadors is probably like the kinder thing, and the thing that we really need more. Like, we don't get a lot of like trolls and griefers and spam bots in our server yet, but we get a lot of new people asking simple questions. And you know, I think one step of this might be to just kind of like recognize the people who have already been doing that, give them a little flair, and then give them access to sort of like one mechanism I've thought of would be to like give people who have that sort of like the skeleton crew flair, like the community ambassadors, can have access to like a special set of emojis that you can use to like tag questions that we can then scrape and sort of like, you know, like, so it's like, oh, like if you see a question and you don't have the space to answer it, you can like hit it with the right emoji, and then that will sort of flag it in some other space, and then we can say like, oh, like this person needs help, they have a bug that they can't solve, or like this person needs help, they have like a question and that should be in the docs but isn't, and sort of like that kind of routing and stuff like that to help to organize. Because if it's a totally flat community, meaning like there's no differentiation between like you know the like full hierarchical systems, like the extreme form of that is like like fascism or like monarchy, which we don't want. We are not a benevolent dictator for life community, even though it might look like that from the outside. I promise you that it's not the plan, not the goal. So you don't want like a strict hierarchy, but if it's completely flat hierarchy, that's also difficult, and it's especially difficult for newcomers because you come in to an active community, and then the first question you have is like, what's the deal with this place? What's the lay of the land? Like, who do I talk to? Like, what's the whatever? And if you come in and there's no roles that sort of tell you like these are the people you can ask questions, then it's very hard to navigate. And so we want to sort of streamline that onboarding process as much as possible so that it feels welcoming and inviting to new people, even while we recognize that like it's going to be technical, it's going to be nuanced, it's going to be detailed. People are going to be coming in from a lot of different walks of life. So the goal is not to like hold every hand at every moment, because that's unreasonable, but we can do best effort to making sure that people feel oriented into the community, so that they can at least feel like pointing them towards the resources that they need to support themselves is, I think, like a bare minimum of a welcoming community. And that's the kind of stuff I want to start building towards, which again, like a lot of that comes in the form of recognizing the organic structures that have already occurred within the server and the GitHub and things like that, and then recognizing the parts that work well and shoring them up and reinforcing them, and then noticing the places where things get glunked up and trying to sort of mitigate that. And that'll be fun. That will be fun and good. And another major part another major part of that is like me and the lab sort of starting to engage more directly with the community in the server, and like hosting more streams like this. I think more like popping into the voice channel and talking about stuff about like various people's projects, and also just cleaning up the Discord because it's currently very messy and complex, more complex than it needs to be, I think, because it again has that organic growth flavor, and it is time for pruning. Okay. And ooh, ooh, ooh. Let's see. I think done some of that. Did that. Talked about that. Talked about that. So for this checkbox, I literally just hopped into GPT-4 and on my phone turned on the voice to text, and then was just like blah 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 blah. I want to talk about this. I want to talk about that. Make that a markdown formatted code block with checkboxes, and I just plopped it in here. Yeah, so it's not like particularly, it's not perfect, but it's like the parts I wanted to at least mention. I think I talked about this stuff. Talked about a lot of this. So yeah, so talking about the release candidate, talking about the current state, recognizing that it's still got some broken parts, and we're going to be working on a lot of stuff in the near future. Talking about updates to the documentation. Oh, the thing I didn't mention is the tutorials, which we do have some, including like installation and setting things up. and then like like an initial like onboarding tutorial about how to make a single camera recording, which we're going to do in a little bit. Um, this was also a GPT based blob where I'm just talking into the microphone and saying organize that. So it's not particularly like a lot of the basically when I do that, it does a pretty good job of like capturing the words and fixing the grammar, but it's an AI, so it gets weird sometimes. So and it's stuff like add a screenshot here, like things like that that just needs to get done. Um, and yeah, talking about the style guide, and talking about like the community contributions and like the importance of like making sure that we have shored up our community infrastructure in preparation for the growth of this project that is likely to occur when this intentionally quiet 1.0 release candidate rollout gets the release candidate part dropped and just becomes a full software. And then basically what will happen is that will happen. We'll continue to do it quiet, just like not making any announcements like outside of the server or outside of GitHub, um, just so that every time there's like a new stage of the software, we can grow in a staged way. Like we do not want to go viral at this moment. We do not want that because if we did that, it would be great. But we are not set up to handle that influx of people, so it would just add a bunch of chaos, and you'd get a bunch of new eyes on the project, which would be great. But like, I would rather grow slow, and then let the let our ability to manage the scale of the project grow in accordance to the timeline of the project, and not have something where we wake up tomorrow and instead of 1,300 people in the community, there's 13,000 people in the community, because that kind of thing can happen very easily. I mean, not very easily, but like I consider that like a risk that I'm trying to avoid at this point in my life. I want to get to, it'd be nice if we had like 10,000 people in the server, but like just imagine the server as it is today with 10 times as many people asking if it has real time yet. uh, that's not a fun server to be in. I would rather get there in like a year, after or two, after long, slow, steady growth and like cleaning up and pruning, so that way, you know, it feels more like a functional metropolis, and less like a chaotic free for all. Um, yeah, and then also, in the spirit of the project, we want to make sure that it's like different XP people with different levels of XP, people with different backgrounds, different skill sets can all contribute, as much or as little as they want. You don't have to contribute to be a part of it, but the hope is that eventually, you might want to. And yeah, and then I said mods here. I think more like community ambassadors, ambassador type of thing. Trent came up with the name Skeleton Crew a long time ago, which I still think is funny. So maybe that will be recruiting for the Skeleton Crew. It's just like it's got the skeleton aspect, which I think is very on vibe, and it also is evocative of like there's not enough of us to do this job, which I think is like that's the vibe. Yeah, and then more of these sort of like being more open with the community about like what's happening, both in the forms of like live streams and also just like being present in like voice channels on the chat for people who like want to be working on stuff. Some kind of like office hours arrangement. The semester is ending, so the schedule is going to shift. But off the top of my head, I'm thinking something like once a month on Twitch, and then like once a week in the server, and then sort of like organically between there and that. So like that way, there is some sort of dialogue happening, at least on a weekly basis, and then like more like announcement style stuff happening once a month. So this is very announcement style. Like I'm literally not even looking at chat, just because I have a lot that I want to say. But eventually, like, like if there does develop a subgroup of people who are working on improving the Blender output, we can check in once a week and be like, hey, how you doing? How's it going? And I've been kind of also like microcosming that type of workflow with Mac Pribble, who is been in the server, bounces around time to time, and has been working on a super cool improvement to our calibration procedure, which will be still needs some shoring up before it's ready for prime time, but he's got like a nice minimum viable product, I think, that is so it's very exciting to think about integrating that into the system. And on vibe with the rest of the conversation, that his calibration stuff I think is much more suited towards a real-time version of the software than the current AnyPose system. Um, so we do like that. Yeah, so monthly and weekly hangs or whatever. Oh yeah, and communication will remain through GitHub and Discord primarily. Um, Blender, blah blah blah, blah 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 blah. Thanks for tuning in. Check. Okay. It is 3:18. Which is pretty good. Ooh, Jawa knows what's up. Jawa said the future will involve a bot that has ingested all the documentation. Uh, yes, indeed. I have not been talking about that specifically on this stream because I don't want to get too much into that, but I have been going all the way down on the new way of large language models and things like that. I will mention it very briefly because I don't want to get too sucked into that. But basically, so you often hear me talk about how I don't have a background in like this, that, or the other. Like I don't have a background in software development. I don't have a background in animation, blah, blah, blah. That is because I do have a background in cognitive science and computational neuroscience. Like my bachelor's degree was in philosophy with a focus on philosophy of mind, language, and science. Then I got a PhD in cognitive science with, and then a 5 years postdoc in a computational neuroscience department, and I'm now a professor of neuroscience. I originally studied language, so all that stuff is in my field for sure. That is closer to my actual training than software development or motion capture. Um, and I see in those models like not the specific GPT or whatever, but just like the technology that's emerging around these large language models, a massive potential for the open source community, because you know you can literally take all of your documentation, all of your knowledge base, chop it up. Uh, if there's anybody here who's interested in this stuff, the primary mechanism I would recommend, like what I have, the bedrock of the tech, as far as I can tell, is around this Lang chain. Lang chain is the place to go. Like don't buy any of these like shitty weekend projects that people are trying to pitch. Um, go to Lang chain and then read their docs, and then this is the actual future. Um, and at some point there will be an AI help bot in the server who it will Skelly bot, and they will know all the documentation, all the knowledge base off the top of their head. And one of those special emojis that I want to dole out to the ambassadors eventually will be an emoji that summons the bot. And if it's like, oh, this is a question that the bot can answer, you put the emoji down, the bot opens up a thread, and then you can have a conversation. The person will still help the newcomer to like mediate, but if the question is something that can be answered from the documentation, the bot can handle that. And then similarly, if someone wants to start doing development and they're new, if we build the oh, we want to have this feature. Okay, well then you have to outline the feature, outline the conditions for success, outline what we're going for, outline the whys. And then if you feed that into an appropriately configured large language model enabled bot, a lot of the pull request and sort of like early level triaging can happen that way. can happen in an automated way. Similarly, you got to be really careful with how these machines write code for you. But one thing that they're very good at is writing documentation, like basic, like sort of like API level documentation, and writing tests. So you can literally just, if your code is small enough, you can just select it, right click it, and then say like make a test. And it won't do it for this because this is this is not code, but that's the kind of stuff that we'll get to at some point. Not right now. Yeah, cool. Hey, and it's Mac. Where is I have too many streams running right. Oh, there it is. I have like too many versions of myself in rectangle form on my screen. I couldn't figure out where the comments are coming from. Um, so yeah, it's I think that the new tech, the new AI tech is concerning at a societal level, mostly because of how we should reasonably expect the powers that be will utilize tools this powerful. But on an individual project level, it also has the potential to like really supercharge open source software development and decentralized education, which is good because I think that those things are in fact the protections that we would need from the problems that will emerge. So the sword has two sides, at least two sides. And that's just going to be, we're just going to navigate that together as a group. Okay. With all that said, let's do a quick demo of the new code. If it works, I think it will. All right. And stage. Okay. Yeah. So first of all, let me do a pull. Get onto the main branch, I think is good. I think that there is still a crashing bug on the main branch. Is this the one I want? Check out revision, reset current branch to here. Hard. This is scary as hell. Hope I didn't do anything important. Okay. Doop. Okay. So first things first. So this is PyCharm, and this is the latest version of the code. It is currently on version 1.0.6-RC. 1 is the exciting number. Major version, minor version, then patch. So the patch version, that will just increment upwards. You don't really need to you pretty much will always want the biggest number there. Changes to the minor version are changes that will affect the way that it is used. It might break something that you're using. And then this number means everything is changed. And the RC at the end means that this is a release candidate. It is not released. It is a candidate for release. And so the next big milestone is like clipping this part off and just having it be 1.0 plus. The code currently runs. So you can pip install it there, and then once it's installed, you can just type FreeMoCap into the terminal, and it should launch. And it will look similar to this, not exactly like this, because this is a little out of date. Yeah, or you could run it from the source code like that by using pip install -e period, and then launching it that way. So let's do that. Let's see what it looks like. And it is currently, yeah, it's 3:30, which is good because I feel like I have about half an hour of brain juice left, at which point I will have to go look at trees that are made out of wooden leaves instead of made out of like dictionaries and JSONs. Okay. So I appear to already have this environment set up. I could go through the whole rigmarole, but I don't. I don't want to. Instructions are there. Just do that. And building tutorials and stuff like that is what we're working on now. So let me just pip show Skelly cam. That should be 1:10:82. Yep, that should be right. Okay. Get poll just to make sure we're up to date. Okay, we do have that, but is this... I made a change that was a bad change at one point on this branch. I want to make sure that I've been trying to fix it. Yeah, so it's not. Drop commit. Huh, there you go. That was way easier than it was comfortable. Okay, so this should now work. Da 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 da. Okay, I think I just typed FreeMoCap. Huh? Yeah, should work. And it's gonna take some time to start up. And where you at, buddy? I think it does some stuff under the hood the first time it sets up. That takes some time. Which is that's some kind of performance-based, some performance-y stuff. I honestly don't know why it's loading OpenGL. There you go. Something didn't like that. Wait, is that... this was the thing I just tried to fix. So, it's back. Why is it back? Okay. I am confused by that because I'm pretty sure I just did that. Maybe I accidentally undid it. Oh, I know why. No, I don't. Okay. Anyway, here's the GUI. Hooray! Look at him. Look how pretty he is. This is Skelly. Pronouns he, they. This is also supposed to be a little Skelly icon down here. It was working at some point. It stopped working. I'm not 100% sure why, but moving on. And it's got this button here to if you don't want to send a ping to us saying that you've used it, uncheck this. But you do need to do it every time because probably the biggest quality of life thing we could do to improve things here is to save your previous session and like load those stuff in. Like right now, every time it loads blank slate, default, which is annoying because you have to like set your cameras every time and things like that. So we'll get there. So yeah, there's, here's some actions you can do. I believe all of which are accurate. There's help, which is sends you to the documentation. And then this about us that goes to like the FreeMoCap. Oh, that goes to the wrong place actually, but it's good enough. And then support us, which says please give us money because I don't have funding. Hopefully we'll be able to get funding, but I do not currently have funding. I don't have any significant funding, I'll say that. Or rather, I had significant funding, but it's basically out, and then I've gotten a little bit of pieces here and there. But yeah, and so the standard, the quickest path to victory workflow that I'm aware of is just click on new recording, and then just do a single camera recording. We now support single camera mode, which is exciting and simple. I currently, it's getting 2 cameras just because I have 2 cameras, but hello. This is the part. So I mentioned that there are some performance issues with the number of cameras that are hopefully soon to be fixed. And and when I say fixed, I don't mean like bug fix. I mean like we've massively increased the sophistication of how we're handling the camera backend in ways that will theoretically push us to like different tiers of performance. But until then, if you try to run too many cameras or too many cameras at too high a frame rate, basically like if asking for too much data to go through, you'll start to see this queue size number here like increase. Basically what that's saying is the back end is logging all of the frames, but the front end is not able to display them fast enough, so you start to get build up. So we've changed the default resolution from 1280 720 to 960 540. But if you have issues, just use feeder cameras or drop the resolution, and then keep an eye out for the update to Skelly Cam that will improve the world. Okay, and then if you want to record calibration videos, you can do that. That's your classic Charuco board stuff, which it's been around for a while, but it's also yeah. So multi-camera calibration is important and is necessary if you want to get like reliable 3D data. But it is a complication that sort of a lot of people bottleneck at, because a lot of people apparently most people don't have like a ton of just like webcams lying around. Like this is just a part of my life. And also, printing out the board is like a simple printout like this is easy, but a bigger printout is more challenging. Sharsted, the timeline for the Skelly Cam update is hopefully on the scale of weeks, but with appropriate potential increases in base unit on that space. But it should be pretty. I think at this point it's at the level of polish. I'm kind of waiting on Endurance was doing a refactor because there was some issues. If you recall, like a couple, probably months at this point, where I was like, update it, and then student Josh was like, that broke everything, and I was like, okay, roll back. That was the part where we started having to refactor, because like we had increased the sophistication, the technical sophistication, but there was something getting borked up in the pipes. So it wound up, the fixes were not difficult, but they just got deprioritized because we were trying to get this up and running, and just sort of like letting the camera back end be bottlenecked, basically, because like yeah. So soon is when it will be done, at the time that all open source stuff is done, as soon as possible. Okay. All right, so that's me. I'm gonna bump the resolution up to 1280 by 720. And if you're like, wow, it's weird that you have to type those numbers in manually, why isn't it a drop down of resolutions? It's like, well, let me tell you. The answer is because I haven't done that yet. And it's like that scale of thing, right? It's like, oh, these resolutions, like that should be a drop down of expected types. It shouldn't be like a thing you have to type in every time. Like that's the kind of thing that I think you could make a little, like right at the issue, define the task, say where in the code to look for. And then someone with software development experience, especially someone who's done like GUI and Qt stuff, you could pop in and you could like, that's the kind of thing you could like do on, like a student can do that. it might take them a while, but they could figure it out, and then we could like work with them in the PR to get the code up to level. Like it's that type of stuff is the thing that I think we want to start like opening up for contributions on that scale. And then the real challenge there is just organizing the labor, because if it's like everybody just starts working on stuff, then it's like, first of all, it's chaotic, and secondly, you wind up getting like reduplication of effort. Like two people start working on the same thing at the same time, and then like, you know, whoever gets it done first is, you know, gets merged, and the other people don't. Like, we don't want that either. I don't have a solution for that immediately, but you know, one could imagine what that would look like. Okay, so we're gonna do a single camera recording video, and the way you set that up is you have this is very technical, so please follow. You just have one camera, and then you start recording, and then you stop recording. That's the process. You have to have Blender installed, and there's a method that will try to find your Blender executable if it's in like an expected location, but if you've got it somewhere else, you might need to, you know, just find it yourself. And then choose the default method for now, because these two don't, just use the default method. And this default, everything default. And you don't need a calibration for a single camera. So what this is gonna look like is I'm gonna push record, then I'm gonna zoom back so we can see more of my body, but it doesn't need to see all my body, and I'll push stop. Okay, so record. And hello, these are my hands. I have two fingers. Thumbs up. Hooray! Ooh. I'm gonna be all flat Stanley here, so get ready for that. Okay, so that's 364 frames. Oh, also there is a log view down here, but it's also not complete. It spits out these views. With single camera, it's somewhat irrelevant here, but it's helpful to see with multiple cameras that like the first, middle, and final frames are equivalently synchronized, and then that the timestamps and frame rates are what you would expect. And then until we get this the log view of our code set up properly to capture anything, you still have to kind of look at the terminal that launched the GUI to be able to see what's going on. Again, another like the fact that the log view does not capture all of the logs is one of those things that like someone that knows what like standard error port, standard, you know, STD out and whatnot, like that's someone could handle that, I think. Or just there's like some like broken partially functional code that does that job that we just need to shore up. Okay, now here we are, and we are in single camera mode, so grab and Z and grab an X, and then turn off there, and so basically so MediaPipe does try to predict 3D from 2D, but it's hot garbage. Anything that's trying to get 3D from 2D is lying to you. Not forever, but in the current sort of era of technology, you just can't reliably estimate 3D from 2D. And even if you could, as a scientist, I would not trust that data. But you can get 2D from a single camera, and basically what just happens is it stays on the same depth plane, and then as I get closer, the scale changes. So, and if you're saying like, well, why don't you just like keep the scale constant and then use that to estimate the depth? It's like, well, because I haven't yet. That sounds like a great project for you. But this I think could be really cool, because like for animators, you can use this. One could use this to drive like a 2D animation pretty, I won't say easily, because nothing is easy, but viably, you know, because you can basically do the 2D animation thing and, you know, plop this guy on the mesh and then use it to attach, you know, whatever the body parts to it, and then there you go. And it's even got hands. Even in this crappy lighting, you can see the hands, things like that. And then if you wanted to record a multi-camera recording, which we still have a little bit of time, so I'll just go ahead and do that too. The process is the same, except now you have multiple cameras. So I'm going to turn this camera back on. See, apply settings to cameras. And a little dark. Ah, oh dear. um, I'm going to turn these back to the defaults, and I think that exposure setting is fine. So this exposure number matters a lot. I think this is fine enough for a demo. And now I have the calibration. So stuff like this is where I say like the user UX UI aspects of this need help, because there's really like there's no way to know that this is what you're supposed to do. I mean, you can look at it and you can like know what the workflow is supposed to be, but like it's very not obvious from the outside. This is not welcoming to no experienced people. But you know, a lot of this phase of the process was just like get all of the parts onto the GUI and functional so that an expert user can do it. And then once the expert, once the thing you're trying to do is possible, then you can also, then you can rearrange the Lego pieces however you want to enforce whatever kind of like user experience you want. And yeah, and a lot of the design philosophy here is about like the concept of progressive disclosure, where when you first show up, like you're not bombarded with like a huge amount of complexity. Like the complexity is there underneath if you want it, if you want to have that level of control, but you don't have to engage with the tool at that level to be able to get started using it. And so we're trying to, it's often like we're trying to like simplify that the workflows and the views as much as we can, in order to make it more welcoming for beginners, but also having sort of like the invitation to dive deeper at whatever time that you want to do that. Okay, so I'm just separating the cameras a little more on my monitor. There's both of my monitor, because the farther apart they are, the more information that they provide for depth estimate. So if they're like right here, you know, there's just not much of a difference between those viewpoints. So if you think about like triangulating, it's a very pointy triangle. So small amounts of error in either place is going to like have a significant difference on the depth. Whereas separating it out more, you make a wider angle, which at some point becomes a problem, but there's sort of a sweet spot there. In that one. So this is well enough. That one, and I want to be here-ish. Okay. So now I'm going to record a motion cap. So recording a calibration video. 39 millimeters is in fact the size that pops out if you print the Chiruko board. There is a cat who must be evicted before she steps on the wrong button, because she does love to do that. And all right, and we're going to start. So we're now recording the calibration video, basically just giving the two cameras shared viewpoints of the object of known shape and size and trackability. And stop recording. And so now this is the same stuff, same way it's been for a long time, right? Sort of, you record the calibration videos, it processes it with any pose. Yeah, so now we can see like, so this and this looks like the same moment in time. So we're happy with the calibration or with the synchronization. Also, the timestamps are right on top of each other as they should be. Don't worry about that. Or if you know how to deal with that, that's great. Okay, and now it's running through the any pose optimization stuff. I'm gonna take this away from me because it's creepy. Oh, right, this is still the era of one of the reasons so the cameras are being recorded on the back end independently of the GUI, but the GUI, the processing, like the behind the scenes processing, is competing with resources for the GUI, which is not great. But so the smart move is to turn off the cameras when you're processing data. Okay, I'm gonna do another recording now. This time with 2 cameras and a calibration. And here we go. Hello. That was all movements designed to produce interesting looking motion capture data. So a lot of like splayed fingers. Wow, look. Wow. Look, I'm changing depth. It's like watching 3D movies, you know? It's like the person comes in and it's like, "Oh, King, look, here's the thing." It's like, whatever, man. Oh, right. And so the thing that I said, so yeah. Love it. So you look at this actually. Because it's dark in this room, I mean, this is blurry, but you can kind of see that my fingers are blurred. I was moving my hands. You can see it on the Twitch stream too. Like my fingers are blurring here. Sotomonte, or no, Lazy Beef is asking the question of potential freemium models for support, and we've been thinking a lot about different mechanisms of like, you know, getting like having like a paid aspect of this. Like the core software, FreeMoCap, free, always free. It's in the title. I'm not going to change the name, so it's going to have to say free. And I think, but there are still ways that we could monetize aspects that would, I think, allow us to get some support for this project while still like remaining aligned with the ideals of it. Oh yeah, see, so watch this. So recording at 7 frames per second. If I close the cameras, it'll jump up to like 9 or 10. But yeah, so as Lazy Beef said, like there's a lot of mechanisms for that. One potential is like the software is free, everything local is free, but there might be some kind of like cloud services that are paid. So like we might have like cloud storage for your data, or like you might be able to like, you know, upload, like if you don't want to like process your data on your local computer, you can upload it to some like server, and then it could process on some like massive GPU machine that can run models that your computer can't and like my computer can't. And then you could, you know, pay for that. You know, as we're starting to move in towards like AI enabled helpers, like if we had like a little, you know, chat bot down here that could like look at your logs and be like, oh, you had this error. You know, that stuff costs money. Like the API calls cost money. So we could, like, I don't want to keep like, I never want to put like core functionality stays free. Educational content always stays free. There's a lot of, Blender does this. They put their educational content behind the paywall. That offends me at like a deep level. I understand it. I don't blame them, but I don't want to do it. But and basically, I think from a philosophical point of view, I don't like charging for things on the basis of false scarcity. Like there is like I could charge for the software, but I'm lying to you if I said that was necessary. Like This software is a big old pile of Python files. It's folders full of text files. There is no scarcity there. I can multiply it a billion million times and nothing has changed. No resources have been lost. So I don't want to charge for that. Educational content, if it's static educational content, like I made it for a class and I put it online, there's no scarcity there. You can have it forever. If it's my time, oh baby, that's limited, and oh baby, that's going to be expensive. So like any kind of service or consulting stuff, like if it involves like a human's time, you know, one of the taglines of FreeMoCap is knowledge is free, labor is incredibly expensive. And then sort of in the middle ground between those two things of like human effort, like absolutely limited, versus like core software definitely not limited. There are sort of middle ground stuff about like cloud services. Like if we want to host data in a like a database somewhere, that will cost us money to host, and it will cost us effort to maintain. So it makes sense to charge for it. Similarly, like running stuff on a server, like that's a limited resource. Like if I had the servers and I had unlimited energy, it wouldn't be, but I don't. So it makes sense to charge for it. Similarly, like API calls to like an OpenAI or whatever sort of AI model that can handle like the auto docs and auto helper stuff. Um, Again, that costs money, so like makes sense to charge for it. So then the ethics come in to like how much do you charge for it? Because if you're just charging break even, um, then you're not really supporting the longer term growth of the product. Um, so that's where the questions come in particular for the AI bot stuff, API, like charging for the API. That's like kind of in the middle ground of like stuff I would consider like educational content. So I don't want to paywall it. Um, so I've been thinking about different models where like there could be like a community pool of funds that API calls for the AI bots get pulled out of. And then it's sort of a, like if there's like a little thing on the right that's like this is being paid for by a community pool, at the current rate of expenditure, the pool will be dry in like 6 months or a week or 3 months or whatever. I think then that would allow people to use it without having to buy in before they know that they want it. But it will also kind of like be like a gentle encouragement for people who are using it regularly. If they're like, oh, this is going to be drained in 3 months, maybe I should kick in a couple of bucks. It's basically we're trying to come up with solutions to a classic ethics problems like tragedy of the commons and prisoner's dilemma and that kind of stuff. And those are just hard problems, so there's no expected easy solution. But you know, the goal is to have something that like a sustainable project that can do what it's doing for a long time. And you know ethics and morality are important, but if you are so rigidly attached to like what is right that you kill your own project, that's less good. So we're just going to be navigating that. That's very much in the scale of like the next phase kind of stuff. And we might start playing around with stuff, different models and whatnot. But we'll navigate that collectively, and I will I will do my best not to make like unilateral decisions, but I mean I reserve the right to do that. But I'll try to like engage the community on these decisions as much as possible. And now we've got this guy. The scale seems wrong. Maybe just all those balls seem wrong. Oop. um, yeah. So it's it's doing its thing. I think given that it's a dark room with just two cameras that are pretty close to each other, this is pretty good. You really want to have a very bright room without a lot of garbage in the background. And I tend to say at least three cameras that are sort of significantly separated from each other. But yeah, looking pretty good. Aficionados will notice that there is no longer an armature being rendered here. and that is true. The armature is still in the code. I think it is. I think it might be failing at this point. Basically, it was kind of working, but it was coming out broken, and it was the kind of thing like it wasn't actually doing any work. Like it was mostly just distracting, and it wouldn't have been useful for folks. So I just kind of like more or less disabled it. And so now these are just empties, um, uh, empties with sphere meshes attached to them, um, and we can talk about various ways of improving this as a group. Okay. Here we go. Oh, there's also technically. Oh wait, no, I guess it's not working. There's technically a viewer, but apparently it really is only technical because it doesn't appear to work. This is it needs some love. This is Skelly viewer. This is another one of those like split off micro repos, similar to Skelly Cam, and it needs some work. There's also a directory view, so you can see the code, the data that's being generated. If you click back here, you can go in here and like select an older guy, right click it and say set as active recording folder, and then it will set it at that down there. And then the active recording will sort of tell you the stuff that they're, again, this is all like, this is not a good user interface as it exists. It's very limited and needs some love. Like stuff that should be visible. Let's see, like, oh, this is old. I'm glad I'm wearing a shirt. Like, like not everything is in the right place. Like your eyes, it will take your eyes a long time to find things. Like the colors are not doing a lot of work, so there's not like a good like visual hierarchy of like what's important and what's not. And that's fine. We'll get there, but it's, yeah. Oh yeah. When in doubt, Control R will reload the GUI. But yeah, so there you go. That's the situation. And that's where we're at. So I hope you've enjoyed the conversation. I can stick around for like a couple minutes if anyone has any questions, or I might just call it good, and throw y'all at some other friendly streamer and then call it a day. It's been really fun. It's been really challenging working on this project, but the community of it has made it really rewarding. And the fact that there's so many people on the server who are using it in its like current kind of like limping format, or just being like supportive of the development or excited about the development, is just so incredibly rewarding and like encouraging and motivating. And I don't know where it would be. Like it's hard to imagine what this project would be if no one had ever noticed or cared. Like, I think I would have done something with it, like just in the lab, but it wouldn't have gotten to where it is now, and it definitely wouldn't have gotten to where I think it could go in the future. And really excited to keep developing and keep growing with everybody, and incredibly excited to start like opening up more, like starting to breaking down the sort of like amphitheater style of development and moving towards a more like federation kind of federated style. Like these are all terms from this book, which I might at some point, I kind of want to do like work through this book in like a public space and just like talk about the content in here, because I think it would be really fun. But I don't need to be picking up any new side projects right now. But I think a lot about the future of the growth of this project. I think a lot about like moving, like my dream is to sort of decenter myself from it as much as possible, so that it can become more of an independent entity that I can be a part of, more than what I think it currently is, which is just like thing that John is doing and people get to play with, which it's how things have evolved. It makes sense, but like that's not end game. End game is that this is a is that this is is that it's Skelly's project, the anthropometric skeleton golem sparkle-eyed monster is the that's the project, and then all the meat sack humans around it are just part of the community. Um, but we'll see. Time will tell. Oh, there are some questions here. Oh, Lazy Beef is on YouTube. That's why that's why I wasn't seeing their comments elsewhere. They had questions. Yeah, so current future integrations. So Lazy Beef, my recommendation is hop into Discord is the main recommendation. Really quickly, we spit out raw data in CSV and in MPY format. We're soon to have a mechanism for auto-generating a Jupyter notebook that will just load the raw data in for analysis. And our easiest output now is to spit out to the Blender scene that I was just showing you. Oh, it also calculates full body center of mass, which is if you're into that type of thing. And just Toasty, the armature. I made a lot of progress towards improving the armature, but it never quite got to like the finish line, and I decided to shelve it so that I could get like the core pipeline working, and but it's in a good place for someone else to pick up, because the reality is like I think that it needs to kind of the people like I can get it as good as I can get it, but it's going to need someone who's an actual animator to be a part of that process in order to get it to be where it needs to be. Because otherwise, I'm building something for a community that I'm not really a part of, or I'm a part of it, but I'm not like, I don't have the experience of doing animation stuff that would be necessary. It's for it to be really to get it to be what an animator would want it to be. And so organizing that effort is, I think, going to be a pretty near-term task. Oh yeah, there you go. And that's that. Aaron just posted a link to the Discord into the chat, and if you don't see that because of how you're watching it, FreeMoCap.org. There's a link. There's a Discord link right there. Okay, I am going to throw you at Oh Bother, who has been a friendly person to. Oh Bother is they do like techie Twitch streamy stuff, and I've been using them as like the default catch at the end of this because I think that there's an alignment there in like what we both do. Also, I think just he tends to stream in the afternoons when I'm streaming, so that works out. Oh, Bother. And there we go. Alrighty, y'all. It has. Oh yeah, just Toasty. Your animator is correct. The Blender output is not usable at the moment, and that's probably the endpoint that I'm like the most interested in getting working. Because I think right now it's like FreeMoCap gets it like 6 inches from the place that most animators could pick it up and run with it. It's that gap bothers me, but like one of the things with this kind of like systems technology is like you really do want to like make sure that your core pipeline is working before you start working on like what could be considered a fiddly bit. So core project's working, and connecting it and like getting the output in a way that like animators could really work with is a top level priority going forward. And I think I'm going to click the raid button. It's been real. Thank you. I'll be back sometime. Join the Discord. I'll see you there. Mwah.
For illuminated pixels, we'll do blank and illuminated and see what it does. So far, we've only been able to get cursed imagery out of Chat GPT and AI, or not Chat. Well,